He sat on the wooden bench in the corner, the tap-tap of his own gloved fingers echoing off mirrored lockers. The stale odor of cold Vaseline and sweat clung to the walls, each inhale reminding him that this bout was not routine. Around him, his corner team moved with measured calm, wrapping hands, adjusting headgear. Yet Muhammad sensed a fissure in the air, a tremor beneath routine. No chatter or laughter broke the hush, only the low hum of overhead fluorescence and the distant hiss of a steam radiator told him he was still alive. Tonight's match was billed as a charity exhibition. A young amateur from Atlanta, lean and jittery, eager for a moment under the lights, but no real threat to a former champion. The boy's photograph in the program showed an earnest smile and taped wrists far thinner than Ali's. The bell was meant to mark a friendly showcase, a simple rhythm of jab, cross, clinch, soft applause afterward. But Ali's gut had nodded when he first saw the kid step under the canvas, too still, too pale. He flexed his shoulders, rubbing the leather seam of his gloves as if searching for a hidden seam in himself. His spine tingled, not with anticipation but with foreboding. In the ring's corner, a single spotlight sliced the darkness, revealing every frayed rope and scuff on the mat. Ali hated shadows. They concealed truths better left unseen. When he rose and passed through the velvet curtain, cheers lilted like a broken melody, warm and familiar yet hollow. The heat of incandescent bulbs settled into his skin, sweat popping around his temples before a single punch was thrown. He advanced, eyes narrowing at his opponent's raised glove. In the brief interval before contact, he glimpsed something flash, too quick to trace but too precise to be accident. A silver gleam against flesh, as though a thin blade pressed just beneath the tape. He ducked a lazy swing and stepped inside a clinch, feeling lace fingertips press into his back. No anger in the boy's hold, only a steady weight, empty of malice yet carrying intent. Ali's heart sped as he leaned close, breath fogging mist over his visor. He free-handed a sharp elbow into the ribs, not to harm, but to test the boy's reaction. Instead of pain, the opponent's eyes glazed with acceptance, as though he had already counted on that strike. Ali released him, backing away toward the center. The crowd's murmur rose like wind across grass, an indistinct tide. Yet instead of relief, Ali felt a tether pulling him inward, a gravity born of something buried under that gleam, metal, cold, and faithful. He circled, guard up, mind racing through every training drill, every night he had danced on bare knuckles, and every time he'd trusted a man's word. Trust, he recalled, was a luxury few could afford. A final bore through the hush, the tap of the referee's glove against his wrist, signaling the first round. But Ali already heard a quieter sound, the faint whisper of a blade sliding free. He inhaled, bracing for more than any punch, a revelation that would shatter this exhibition into something far darker than a show of goodwill. And as the bell rang, he resolved to uncover what lay concealed beneath that metallic shimmer, even if it meant parrying truths sharper than any hook. The bell's echo faded into a low roar as Ali retreated to his corner, each step measured against the weight of the gleam he had glimpsed. Sweat seared his vision, but something colder ran beneath his skin. His second, eyes sharp, dabbed at his brow with a damp towel. "What's wrong?" the man whispered, voice taut. Ali pressed a gloved palm against the canvas, feeling its give like old scars. "Nothing you'd understand," he murmured, though every fiber of his being bristled with unease. He detected it at once. The boy's right arm taped too tightly, leaving a tiny furrow of white flesh. No ordinary wrap. Ali flexed his wrist, seeking strength but finding only a hollow echo of adrenaline. He rose at the second signal, stepping into the center of the ring where lights bent around his silhouette. The crowd's applause scraped at the air, eager for spectacle. He raised his guard, jabs cracking the silence, but each punch felt as hollow as a wind-whipped banner. Midway through the first round, Ali backpedaled from a lazy hook and felt a cold shiver along his forearm. A paper cut, faint but precise. Not from the glove seam, from something beneath it. He flexed raw skin. No blood flowed, only the sting of suspicion. He lined up his next punch, a straight right, but the boy slipped aside, stepping behind Ali's shoulder, lips grazing his ear. "Stop," the youth breathed in a voice too calm for panic. "I'm not here to fight." Every muscle in Ali's body tensed against confusion. He clinched, pinning the boy's arms to his ribcage. Vinyl gloves pressed against warm skin, yet Ali felt only a cold barrier, like touching steel. The boy's breath stuttered, ragged, and in that instant the tape on his wrist loosened, flicked back, revealing the bare edge of a blade's spine. The metal's polish caught the floodlights, a cruel wink in the oval ring. Ali's mind raced through all the legends of narrow escapes, the stories that trainers whispered at midnight. He sensed the terror not of being cut, but of what might fall from the boy's hand next. A plan, a contract, a blood debt settled in shadow. He released the clinch, stepping back, gloves up, eyes locked on the youth. The crowd's chant swelled, shifting from cheers to uncertain murmurs as they sensed the fracture in the performance. Round 2 began with a fresh bout of jabs, but Ali's arms felt leaden. He ducked under a wild swing and felt the phantom edge graze his temple. No mark, only the whisper of steel. He moved with wary precision, shifting stance, probing defenses. The boy, slender as a reed in a storm, danced around him, every step deliberate, controlled. No one in the audience understood that this was no longer about sport. Between rounds, Ali's corner rushed forward, towel snapping. "They strapped a weapon on him," he rasped in urgent hisses, remembering the glint, the subtle click of metal beneath tape. His second's face drained. "Why?" he asked. Ali swallowed, tasting copper even though the cut had not broken skin. "Money," he said. "And blood." He spat to one side, not from pain, but from contempt. When the third round opened, Ali advanced with the ferocity of a man who understood there was no prize at stake, only survival. His tape hissed as he flexed, knuckles aching. The youth launched a furious combination, but Ali pivoted on a heel and countered with a crushing uppercut to the boy's sternum. Bones rattled, breath punched out in a single gasp. And then Ali dropped him with a sweeping hook, sending the boy to the canvas in a stunned collapse. A hush enveloped the ring, heavier than any cheer. As Ali leaned in, breath stormy, he heard a faint jingle from the young fighter's wrist, Key's wrestling chain. The blade was gone, but the key ring clattered, revealing handcuff keys, tiny artifacts of imprisonment. The boy coughed, blood sputtering at his lips, eyes glassy with understanding. "I'm free," he whispered. But Ali knew that he had mere seconds before the blade, or something worse, returned. The referee's count thudded. 1, 2. Ali's heart matched the rhythm. 3, 4. Ali stepped back, gloves raised, allowing the boy to rise on trembling legs. The crowd exploded, reviving the hillbilly clamor of a spectacle saved from tragedy. But Ali saw only the strip of metal denting the boy's tape-free arm where the blade had rested. His second rushed in, tears damp on his whiskered cheek. Ali turned, face cold as forged iron. "This ends now," he declared, voice carrying over the clamor like a gavel. He marched to the center, raising both gloves. "No more rounds," he barked. The announcer attempted to protest, but Ali's reputation hushed even the microphone. I'm done. He pivoted on the spot, leaving behind the bright ring and the blade's whispering promise. As he strode toward the ropes, Ali felt the weight lift from his shoulders. The weight not of titles lost, but of violence averted. The boy staggered, holding the handcuff keys against his chest. With that final sight, Ali knew the fight had transformed from sport to something deeper, a stand against hidden steel in friendly cloth. He dipped through the ropes and vanished into the wings, the cheers fading into memory amidst the lingering scent of sweat, steel, and righteous relief. A hush fell over the arena as the bell's second clang vibrated through the cables and beams overhead. Ali rose from his corner stool without the usual ritual of bouncing on his toes, his boots planted firmly, toes gripping the canvas as though bracing against a gale. The young challenger, barely 19 and jittering with adrenaline, came at him with a flurry, a snapping jab to the shoulder, a high hook that skimmed Ali's guard. The crowd roared, expecting fireworks, but Ali simply pivoted, feet whispering against the mat, and allowed the blow to slide past as if it were nothing more than wind brushing a reed. In those opening seconds of the second round, every gaze in the house tracked his stillness. No shuffle, no comeback punch. The tension coiled until it matched the throb of Ali's own pulse in his ears, first erratic, then purposefully slow. He felt the boy's breath hot on his neck as the challenger lunged again, fists jabbing like mechanical pistons. Yet Ali did not clinch, nor counter. Instead, he tilted his head, watching the boy's fingertips tremble against the tape-wrapped steel. That small quiver spoke volumes. This was no boxer's bravado, but a man beset by fiercer forces, stripped of his own agency. The youth threw a sweeping right hook that Ali blocked with unexpected ease, then trapped him in a clinch. In the clinch, time slowed. Ali heard the boy's heartbeat sync with the crackle of electricity from the overhead lights. He breathed in, expelled deliberately, and squeezed the young man's taped forearm. The caress of leather on flesh turned to an iron vice. The challenger's eyes fluttered as panic rippled through his clenched jaw. Ali could feel the small metal disc hidden where the tape folded. Thin, cold, ready, he leaned close enough to feel the boy's ragged breath on his temple and whispered, so only the boy could hear, "Don't make me stop this." The rope cradle shook as the referee attempted to pull Ali back, stepping between them, paddle in hand. "Break!" the official barked. Ali released the grip and slid away, guard up, chest heaving with a quiet fury. The referee signaled the boy to retreat to his corner. The crowd hissed and clapped in confusion, some calling for rules to be enforced, others marveling at Ali's iron will. A single voice, sharp as glass, cried, "Let him fight!" Round 3 began with an electric crack of the bell, faster than the eye could catch, and the young fighter came storming in as though to settle a debt. Ali moved with the fluid grace of a ghost, slipping low under a cross, guiding the youth's momentum around his flank. In that whirling pivot, Ali saw again the blade's faint glimmer. On the inner seam of the tape, a sliver of metal barely larger than a fingernail. It flashed only for a heartbeat before melding into shadow. Instead of striking, Ali danced back, arms fluid arcs like wind-drawn silk banners. The youth lunged, boots slipping on the sweat and chalk sprinkled by the corner men. He stumbled forward, face flattening as Ali reached out, catching him under the elbow. In that clinch, this time deeper, arms locked Ali's forearm against the boy's ribs. Ali squeezed and listened. The blade was gone. The boy's arm sagged, body folding as if his own will had betrayed him. A single bead of sweat tracked down Ali's brow, slicing a path through the dark on his skin. He pressed a fingertip to the boy's temple and held him upright. No words passed between them, only the sound of their mingled breaths. Ali's heart hammered in defiance of the crowd's rising clamor. He whispered, "This ends," and tapped the youth's chest, the thud resonant in the hush. The referee stepped in again, counting off the clinch break seconds. Ali nodded, releasing, and the boy collapsed to one knee, head bowed. The official lifted him up, gloved hands firm under the challenger's armpits. The crowd's energy flickered like a candle in a draft. Some whistled in protest, others cheered the end of spectacle. Ali lowered his guard, gaze locked on the youth's upturned face, eyes clouded with relief and disbelief. Behind the referee's back, Ali raised a gloved hand, palm out, as if to signal mercy more than defeat. Then he unlatched his mouthguard, clamped it between his teeth, and strode back to his stool. His second in the corner pressed a towel to his face, and he drew in a long breath, releasing a tide of tension that had lived in his sinews since that first gleam. No announcer's flourish followed, no bell tolled. Instead, the arena lights dimmed slightly, an automatic cue signaling the bout's abrupt end. Ali leaned forward, touching the red corner rope, and looked out at the crowd. Faces blurred through the accessible light. Skeptics, believers, lifelong fans now uncertain what they had witnessed. The youth's seconds gathered him, whispering reassurance. Ali rose, robe trailing behind like an afterthought, and slipped through the ropes without a backward glance. In the hallway, his coach, face grim, met him with a wet sponge and a bottle of water. "Thought you were going to stop it," the man said, voice tinged with relief. Ali shook his head, eyes distant. "That blade, it was never about the punches," he replied. "It was about the choice." Ali tipped the bottle, washing sweat and chalk from his face. The coach clipped his robe and asked, "You okay?" Ali gave the faintest nod and whispered, "Yeah, I'm okay." They walked together toward the locker room, the roar of the crowd receding behind the canvas walls, leaving Ali with a singular certainty. Sometimes the hardest fights are not for belts, but for the courage to spare a life under steel-clad tape. The third gong barely died away when Ali sensed the shift in the ring's airflow. His opponent, no longer throwing jabs or swings, simply met the center of the canvas, feet planted wide like a child caught in a game gone sour. The crowd's fevered roar receded into an uneasy murmur, and Ali realized with a jolt this was not about victory. It was about stopping. Ali lowered his guard without warning, arms unfolding to his sides like open gates beneath the hot sodium lights. The challenger froze, shoulders dropping as silence thickened. Faint echoes of old fights and distant cheers hovered just out of reach, but all attention now hung on this still tableau at the ring's heart. In that pregnant pause, the boy inhaled and spoke, voice neither defiant nor defeated, but raw with confession. "I didn't intend to hurt anyone," he said, words barely above a whisper. "He's in the stands. My father. He's watching." Ali's chest tightened. He read the boy's face, dread mingled with shame, fear lacing his eyelids. The tape on the youth's right wrist, once tight around a hidden edge, now slackened as though shrunk by guilt. The young man's gaze flicked to the crowd as if begging mercy from thousands of unknowable eyes. Ali nodded once and backed into his corner, towel snapping against his shoulder. He raised a hand to signal his second. "List," he murmured, voice graveled. A moment later, a corner man emerged, clasping a clipboard. Its top sheet bore the heading Ravencroft Benefactors, a roster of wealthy patrons who had paid to see this private exhibition. Ali scanned the names: industrialists, politicians, even a media magnate. Near the bottom, he found the father's name, Joseph Red Caldwell, ex-fight trainer banned for brutality, an exiled legend whispered about in smoky bars. His heart thudded, not from blows but recognition. The blade taped beneath the boy's glove was meant as spectacle, a dramatic gambit to force Red's attention. The teenager was neither toy nor victim. He was a messenger in desperation, and Ali alone held the power to end this scene without bloodshed. Returning to center, Ali raised both arms and dropped his gloves hard onto the canvas. The leather thudded, a sound heavy as an indictment. The audience shivered at that unexpected gesture, the champion unarmed, vulnerable in plain sight. He strode toward the boy, each footstep a steady verdict, the fluorescent glare revealing every drop of sweat on his brow. They met at mid-ring. Ali reached out, grabbed the boy by the shoulders, and pulled him into a singular, heavy embrace. No flourish, only the press of uniforms and the soft groan of metal under pressure. In that hug, the knife slid from its hiding place, clattering on the canvas and sending a hush rippling outward. The blade lay abandoned, its deadly promise null in the warmth of Ali's arms. Neither man spoke. The silence buzzed like a hidden amplifier as thousands processed the unexpected mercy. The boy's tears fell into Ali's robe, darkening the silk with quiet truth. Ali loosened the embrace and stepped back, hands raised but empty. He looked for the referee, whose stunned glance demanded direction. Ali shook his head, lips curving in a small, sorrowful smile. Then, without another word, he turned and climbed out of the ring. The crowd remained frozen, waiting for the next act of this unfolding drama. The announcer's microphone crackled as it benchmarked the end of the spectacle, but Ali had already slipped behind the curtain, leaving behind a ring too still to call home any longer. Above, the arena lights dimmed to a single spotlight on the abandoned gloves at the boy's feet. The hush held, suspended between relief and bewilderment, as the once spectacular fight dissolved into a lesson that victory need not be won with fists, and that sometimes, to save someone else, you must first lay down your own defenses. A stunned hush settled over the arena as Ali's bare fists brushed the canvas, the fallen blade lying glinting like a fallen star beneath the bright lights. The roar of the crowd had not yet returned, only the soft rasp of sanitizing mops on the platform's edge and the distant hum of overhead speakers. Muhammad Ali straightened, chest heaving, and reached down to retrieve the small gold microphone that had been perched at the ring's corner. He lifted it with deliberate calm and, with the same gentle authority that had quelled a knife's threat, handed it to the ring announcer. The host, face pale beneath smudged makeup, blinked at the weight suddenly placed in his hand. Ali leaned in close and whispered 2 words, "End it." The announcer's jaw unclenched. He flicked open his notes and returned the microphone to its stand. A murmured announcement rippled through the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, this match is officially concluded." The words were perfunctory, but they carried the gravity of something none had witnessed before. Beyond the ropes, the crowd exhaled in a single collective sigh, half confusion, half relief. Flash bulbs popped in the dim light as photographers captured the silent spectacle. A champion without gloves, a youth without his hidden edge, an arena that had witnessed sport transformed into mercy. No commentary blared over the speakers. No team rushed the ring. Instead, the canvas lay undisturbed, holding only the echo of a night's quiet revolution. Ali pivoted on his heel and stepped through the ropes, robe flaring like a promise. In the corridor beyond, the noise of spectators and exclaims washed through the heavy curtains. He walked briskly, stripped of pretense. At the backstage entrance, a tall figure blocked his path, Joseph "Red" Caldwell, the former trainer with a reputation forged in iron and whispered cruelty. The older man's eyes were sharp as cut stone, one hand resting on a crutch. He recognized Ali instantly and forced a rictus of a smile. Ali said nothing. He stooped slightly and removed his left glove, holding it out before him. The leather caromed softly as it struck the linoleum, the muted thump louder than any punch. Red's expression flickered between triumph and confusion. He limped forward and retrieved the glove, turning it over with a trembling finger. "You think this changes anything?" Red rasped, voice hollow with rancor. Ali's gaze met his. "I don't think, Red," he said, voice level but steely. "I know. He's not afraid of you anymore." Red's lip curled. He raised the glove as though to hurl it back, but Ali did not flinch. Neither man spoke again. In the quiet, cheers drifted from the ring, a distant tide of clapping and whistles. Red, lowering the glove, pivoted on his one good leg and hobbled away, leaving Ali alone in the corridor's dim glow. A guard passed by, clipboard in hand, pausing. "Champion," he half-whispered, tipping an invisible hat. Ali nodded once, shoulders easing as though shedding the fight's weight. He stepped into the cool night air, where the city's neon breath met the humidity. The faint hum of generators mingled with taxi horns, a lullaby of survival. Moments later, Ali returned to the empty ring, now bathed in soft amber lights. A single spotlight tracked him as he climbed the steps, the soles of his shoes whispering across the ropes. He paused at center, arms folding around his chest, head bowed in reflection. Under the floodlight, he unclipped his robe, folded it neatly over the top rope, and then removed his right glove, laying it beside its twin. He stood silent, eyes glancing upward to the rafters, where banners fluttered and dust motes danced. The arena, so recently alive with fury, now felt like a sacred space, its roar replaced by a quieter truth. A maintenance worker, broom in hand, stood at the ring's entrance. He watched Ali for a moment, then began sweeping the matte surface, the brush's bristles swishing in steady arcs. Ali smiled faintly at the simple rhythm, the ordinary task of cleaning, but he said nothing. He turned toward the exit, pausing at the bottom step as though drained by more than the fight's exertion. Over his shoulder, he glanced once more at the abandoned gloves and the fleck of metal that had nearly shattered 2 lives. Then, without a backward glance, he walked down the aisles, each footfall a quiet statement. Sometimes the most powerful actions are those unseen on any broadcast, felt only in the unspoken spaces between mercy and justice. The doors of the arena clicked shut behind Ali, sealing the night's echoes inside. In the hush that followed, only the distant hum of air handlers and the occasional scrape of a cart against concrete broke the stillness. Muhammad Ali stepped through the blackout curtain and emerged into the empty ring, its ropes slack, the canvas mottled with chalk and sweat. He moved to the center, shoulders heavy with fatigue and something deeper, an unfamiliar ache of consequence. He sank onto the second rope, draping his forearms across its taut cord. In his gloved hand he held a folded piece of paper, its creases worn from his grip. The overhead lights, blinking on a timed circuit, cast a pale glare over the scene, lighting the rough grain of the wooden stool still waiting in his corner, the small puddle of water that had gathered at the base of the post, and the single pair of unused gloves lying to the side, leather cracks catching the flicker. Ali unfolded the note slowly, as if it were a relic too precious to open quickly. The words on the page were written in cramped but deliberate script, 3 sentences that neither thundered nor wept for attention, but smiled with quiet wisdom. Strength is not measured by the power you unleash, but by the peace you leave behind. His breath caught. The phrase resonated deeper than any roar, defining the invisible distance between the fight and its true purpose. He traced a fingertip along the line, feeling the indent of ink beneath his glove. Above him, the spotlight pulsed once, as though acknowledging the truth. In that solitary moment, Ali understood that this ring, once a stage for triumph and blood, had become his confessional. He slid down from the ropes and placed the note on the canvas, smoothing it flat as though laying a final stone. Behind the curtain, footsteps approached. One of the ring attendants, a gaunt older man who had set up the ring for decades, stepped out with a broom. The bristles whispered across the mat, sweeping the last crumbs of straw and chalk into a neat pile. Ali watched the broom's arcs until the man paused, sweat-darkened shirt clinging to his back. The attendant offered a nod, wordless solidarity in the quiet aftermath. Ali rose and extended the note, handing it carefully into the man's palm. "Keep this," he said softly, voice echoing in the cavernous silence, "not as a souvenir, but as a reminder." The attendant's eyes widened slightly, and he slipped the paper into his jacket pocket. Then he resumed his work, sweeping with renewed purpose. Ali turned toward the exit ramp and climbed the steps, each footfall deliberate and light. He paused at the threshold, glancing back at the ring one final time. The ropes, posts, and canvas seemed less like props and more like markers for a journey. One last round in a fight not against flesh and blood, but against the echo of violence itself. He walked off the platform into the corridor, where the janitorial carts lined the walls and a single fluorescent tube flickered overhead. He passed closed concession stands, their shutters bearing the scuffs of thousands of sneakers. The stale scent of popcorn lingered. A playful aftertaste contrasted with the gravity he carried. At the loading dock, a faded exit sign hovered above heavy doors. Ali reached out and pushed them open, feeling the weight of the cool night air wash over him. City lights glowed through the gap, and distant traffic hummed like a reminder that life beyond the ring continued unabated. He paused on the threshold, gloves tucked under one arm, robe swaying with his breath. The note's wisdom settled in his mind, a lesson earned in silence. Without a backward glance, Ali stepped into the urban night, leaving the stadium empty but for his quiet victory. And in the darkness, the words he carried became a part of him, guiding each step away from the ring and into a world that needed more than champions. It needed peace,